The atom bomb, arguably the most powerful weapon known to mankind. A weapon that utilized the very atoms to destroy, but could also be used to create. In the 1950s, there was a surge of reported mutations. The height of this occurred in 1954, such as I'm sure most of you would remember the legendary Gojira attack of 1954. It was also an age of exploration, such as the case with the creature from the Black Lagoon, as it is said to be. But we will be talking, many of these cases go strangely unsubstantiated, hearsay and government black boxes rule the files. Such is the case with the subject of today. This was a difficult one to speak of because there's very little to go on in this event in 1954. This was unfortunately this was very heavily censored by the government of that time and has still not been declassified to this day. So, dear listener, we will try to piece together what exactly happened, not only in the deserts of New Mexico, but also in the event that occurred in Los Angeles and how those two events connected together. Welcome back to The Monsters We Make. I am your host, Mr. Multiverse, and today we will be discussing the curious case of them. So, if you do not wish to subject your nerves to such a strain, now's your chance to, well, we warned you. Our story begins on a, shall we say, mundane event that arguably snowballed into an even massive event. On June 16th, 1954, in New Mexico, what is known as the Alamogordo area, near where nuclear testing had occurred recently, a young girl was found wandering the desert aimlessly, almost in a trance-like state. Sergeant Ben Peterson and his partner Ed Blackburn found the girl after a plane that had been flying over spotted the girl walking down aimlessly through the desert. Peterson and Blackburn were the closest officers at the time. They took the case and found the girl. This is her right here. The young girl's name is the young girl name is Sandy Ellenson. She was the daughter of John Ellison, who will play a part, even though no matter how minor it is. The Ellison family were apparently vacationing in New Mexico. The head of the Ellison family was a FBI member. Now, the girl, as I said, the young Sandy Ellison, was in a trance. It was almost like a trance-like state of whatever she witnessed. It was traumatizing, so much so that it left her in a almost catatonic state. Officers Blackburn and Peterson managed to find the girl's, her family's trailer, and believed at first it was just a missing child that they had that the parents had misplaced her. It's a big desert, that normally does happen. But when they arrived, they discovered that the Ellenson trailer, as you see here in this forensics photo that I managed to recover, was torn to shreds. Now, what's important to note is that, as you see, this was, you may say that, oh, this was a breaking and entering. This was a clear case of breaking and entering. Not so. The trailer had been ripped outwards. Normally, something like this, you'd think it'd be an explosion. There would be an inward impact. But instead, something had grabbed one side of this very sturdy trailer and pulled it out before entering and murdering Mr. and Mrs. Ellenson. Now, the young Ellison girl, Sandy Ellenson, was taken to a local hospital so she could be treated for any kind of wounds, and also in the hopes that maybe when she got out of this catatonic state, she'd be able to speak and tell what had happened. In the meantime, officers Peterson and Blackburn had the idea that a local store owner, a man known as Grant, aka Gramps Johnson, owner of Johnson's General Store, it was nearby, and they had the notion that if he was the closest witness, that maybe something had happened. Now, as these men were headed out to the Johnson's General Store, there was an unknown sound on the wind. Keep in mind, though, that there was a sandstorm that was picking up. The sandstorm hit its peak by the time around 7:30 at night, when they had arrived at Johnson's General Store. Excuse me. However, what Officer Blackburn and Peterson found was exactly the same carnage that they had encountered at the Ellenson trailer. According to what police reports we know of, the Johnson store had also been ripped out from the side, completely pulled out, as if like a truck or a forklift had torn a hole through the wall and pulled it back. Not only that, Johnson himself had been found in the cellar of the store, apparently pulled down there, but according to what little coronary reports that are uncensored. Johnson had managed to fire off at least 3 or 4 rounds from his 30-30 repeating rifle. All bullet casings seemed to be crushed, as if they'd hit a hard surface. Now, Peterson returned back to the hospital to check on the Ellenson girl. Ed Blackburn offered to stay behind and find any more clues regarding the store. Unfortunately, 10 to 20 minutes after Officer Ben Peterson had left, Officer Ed Blackburn was killed by an unknown assailant. Now, this is where our story really gets weird, so I would advise you all to keep listening. According to, again, what coronary reports we know of, Ed Blackburn's, as well as Gramps Johnson's body, and the Ellenson parents, Mr. and Mrs. Ellenson, all were killed by a high level of acid injected into their bodies. Apparently, it was enough to, as one report had said, enough to kill an elephant. Now, this doesn't add up in any way, shape, or form, does it? In no way, shape, or form does unknown assailants with what I assume are heavy machinery silently break into an FBI agent's trailer with his family, and also, not only that, manage to kill a gun-owning store owner, as well as a officer who, according to many reports of Ed Blackburn, was the finest shot in his police department. And the bullet casings, again, seemed as if they'd hit like some armored round, armored wall. It doesn't add up in any way, shape, or form. Johnson's rifle was also broken in a way that no human could actually break it. So unless we're dealing with some super strong man, I don't know how to explain these coronary reports, especially just to inject acid into random people. And it's also important to mention that no money was stolen from Johnson's General Store. And there was no robbery of the Ellensons either. If it was a typical breaking and entering, I could almost understand. But here, it's borderline impossible to describe what exactly had occurred. It's nigh on impossible to really articulate in any way that makes sense. Is that, as you can see in this picture here, what one of the things that the only thing that was stolen from the store, as well as the Ellensons, was a large amount of sugar that had been covered in ants. Now, after the police department had managed to, the police department had managed to discover that Mr. Ellenson was a FBI agent, they immediately contacted the Bureau, who sent in Agent Robert Graham. Graham, from what we understand, Agent Robert Graham was a seasoned federal agent. He had gone on many cases. He was well decorated in the war. That's really what we know of. However, once Robert Graham got involved, he sent there were casts of what appeared to be footprints. That's another thing I'd like to bring up, is that there were apparently footprints that I can't find these images of the footprints. It's like, as I said, I'm lucky to have found anything for this podcast. But strange footprints were found in both crime scenes. Excuse me. Both crime scenes had these odd footprints, and Agent Graham, who was very tight-lipped about this and wasn't really sharing much during the event, he had called the Department of Agriculture, not his superiors. He instead went right to the Department of Agriculture, not the FBI, not the Department of Defense, not Homeland Security, no one. He went right to the Department of Agriculture, of all people. Now, one would think this is 1954. Like, there could have easily have been rumors among the police department, or even in the Bureau, that maybe this is a attack by Russian forces that have managed to sneak into the U.S. But then about Mr. Ellenson, because his record was scrapped, but an FBI agent killed by Russian asset, it's a possibility. Why would they kill in such a brutal manner Gramps Johnson as well? And then Eddie Blackburn. And again, wouldn't it make more sense to be to make less of a scene? And also, say what you want about the Russian military of the 1950s. If these were Spetsnaz, as some people had thought, wouldn't they have been thorough enough to kill the girl? Not to be morbid, but one would have to think that they would have known, if we are entertaining the idea that these were Russians, that they would have been thorough enough to know that Ellison had a wife and a daughter. And again, why kill them in such a fantastic fashion? It's not like, and you could make the argument, oh, they were pretending to be like an animal attack. There was no animal that could do that in New Mexico. Or is there? So, getting back on topic, Doctors Harold and Pat Medford, who were actually father and daughter, and entomologists were called in, apparently. This is a photo I'd like to pull up of one. Here we see Graham Johnson on the far left. We see Pat right there. That officer, as you can see, is Ben Peterson. And then we have Harold Memford right there at the end. And what appears to be some strange object. I want to turn your attention to, you see Ben Peterson holding a rifle and what appears to be a large creature at the bottom. You see at the bottom, there seems to be like a section form, almost like an insect in a way. And it does bring up the idea, a thought process that had occurred. Why would you call the department? Again, we go back to the whole thing of why would you call, of all people, the Department of Agriculture? And not only that, why would you call two entomologists to this event? It's also important. I should also mention that when Harold Memford, Dr. Harold Memford, interviewed the Ellison girl, he exposed her to the formulaic acid that killed her parents, and she reportedly went into hysterics, shouting, them. What followed is reports of what happened next were quite unclear. But what we do know is that shortly thereafter, there was a series of bombings in the middle of the New Mexico desert. As you can see right here from one image I've managed to find of an explosion in one specific area. This did lead to a lot of rumors from outside sources claiming that maybe this was a secret war with Russia, that the Cold War was getting hot in New Mexico of all places. I mean, it would make sense that it was near nuclear testing facilities, and perhaps maybe the supposed Russians that had arrived had found Mr. Ellenson and were trying to gain access to a nuclear facility through him. Altercation happened. But then we go back to Johnson. What part does that play? And again, being that, why would you make such a spectacle of so many people's lives and their deaths? Shortly after these explosions, these bombings, which were claimed to be tests, it was merely the U.S. Air Force was apparently, the official report, I should say, was that the U.S. military, or U.S. Air Force, excuse me, was running bombing runs in and around the area. That makes no sense as well. There's little to no way that you would suddenly commit a bombing run to some area, random area in the middle of the desert, and not a designated, because there was an Air Force base in New Mexico where it would have bombing runs. It did have a bombing range. So why suddenly change that to somewhere that was actually kind of close to a populated area? But after the bombings, that seemingly stopped. But what's interesting to note is that the nuclear bomb the bombing around Alamogordo, something else was occurring in that area, or should I say, far from there, because then there were a string of strange reports that followed thereafter. What I mean by that is we start with a event that happened in Brownsville, Texas, where a ranch foreman who was also a crop duster, whose name was I'm looking up the name again. I'm sorry. Alan Cotty. Alan Cotty from Brownsville, Texas, was committed to a local psychiatric facility. There's Cotty right there in the middle. There's Dr. Medford and Agent Graham right there. What had happened was that Mr. Cotty was doing a sweep, a crop dusting sweep in the area, when he encountered what he reported to see 2 UFOs. And what is said during his ramblings and ravings with his doctor was that they looked like ants. 2 of them. 2 giant winged ants. Now, Cotty remained committed for at least 2 more years until he was finally freed. But by that point, he had already according to family members, had become despondent. He had become depressed, and eventually did take his life shortly thereafter, leaving the mental facility in Brownsville, Texas. Following that, in the Pacific Ocean, a United States Navy cruiser responded to a distress call, and there reportedly, what we know only is that there was a shipping vessel that was destroyed after giving that distress signal. There was no reason as to why that was done. All that was a ship was calling out for help. A United States naval ship immediately fired on it after collecting any and all survivors, which I do not know if there were any. This strange string of occurrences all culminated in Los Angeles, where the entire city was put under martial law by the acting governor at the time. No reason was given as to why the entire city of Los Angeles was put under martial law for 48 hours. There were conflicting reports of terrorist attacks. There were conflicting reports of it was a training exercise. What we do know, as you can see from this picture right here, is there was a curfew put out. People were being arrested or even reported to just stay in their homes. And what's interesting is that you see right here, Ben Peterson is still a part of this story. Why would an officer from a small town in New Mexico be still here? Wouldn't the FBI want to keep him out of this? He had done his job. I mean, yes, you could argue that like maybe he perhaps wanted revenge for the killing of his partner, but wouldn't the U.S. government not care about something like that and keep him at bay? That's something to really think about. As for the temporary martial law, as I said, it only went on for 48 hours, and military exercises were conducted deep within the tunnels, underneath the subway tunnels, deep within Los Angeles. There were reports, unconfirmed reports, I should add, of explosions, of flamethrowers being used. What kind of military what kind of military exercise requires not only live ammunition, tanks, and flamethrowers to be used in an underground area that could easily ignite and explode? That is a serious question. At what point does that make any sense? None of this makes sense. At no point is there I can give you a logical answer. Looking at the declassified files we have of this event in Los Angeles and in New Mexico, as well as the event, the crop duster in Brownsville and the sunken ship, I can't give you a single answer as to how this all connects, but it somehow does. It happens in such a rapid succession after the Ellenson family deaths, and it's again these strange footprints continued, and also these disappearances, these these murders. Several more were reported. There was even Officer Peterson himself was killed in this quote unquote exercise by friendly fire, as it was said. Why was he down in that tunnel to begin with? What purpose did an officer with very little military training, what was he doing in that group? And how could he die of friendly fire if it was flamethrowers? I know someone's going to make a joke. Please don't. None of this. It all scream. Why have an entomologist hold? Dr. Memford, his wife, his daughter. He and his daughter had a lot of power. And why was the Department of Agriculture so in front of this? Working on like members of the Department of Agriculture of all places, not the CIA, not the Department of Homeland Security, not even the goddamn president had any of this kind of power, and yet the Department of Agriculture was fronting all of this. I want to go back to the reports, especially the Mr. Cotty's report of the UFOs that shaped like ants. I would like to bring up that there was a nuclear testing facility near that town in New Mexico. Now, as I said earlier in this video, in the intro of this video, there were a lot of reports of mutations that occurred after the nuclear bomb. And as I said, creation is a strange thing. I'm not going to stand here and tell you that the U.S. Army fought a shadow war with giant mutant ants. But if there was one creature that you would not want to have evolve at a rapid pace and be irradiated, it would be the ants. Before I go, I would like to bring up the fact that I had mentioned a strange sound in the wind during both the event with the Ellenson's murders as well as the Johnson store raid. That sound was never recorded, or at least that's what we thought. It had never been recorded. For it turns out, a few years ago, someone came forward, this is going to say, I urge you to bear with me because this is going to be strange. A local wildlife photographer was in that area at the same time, and he had been sitting on this sound that he had picked up on his microphone for years. Now, he had never come forward because he reportedly was threatened by what he claimed to be FBI agents. And I should also note that shortly coming forward with this audio recording, this man, this wildlife photographer, by the name of Gordon Douglas. Mr. Douglas was found dead by suicide in his bathroom. So I will play this audio recording. It's only 10 seconds long, and sorry, I will let you be the judge of what this was. What was that? Well, we may never know. But you tell me, dear listener, do you think it was some sort of mutation born from the bomb? Or was it just something in the wind? But until next time, dear viewer, I am Mr. Multiverse, and here's to a world of gods and monsters.